Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you here. My name's April Sams. I'm the Director of Risk Management and Environmental Health and Safety. Today's session is going to be recorded so that we can share this information with the READ community members who are unable to join us today. We do know that you have a lot of questions on your mind for the fall 2020 semester. In addition to the sessions covered on COVID-19 today, the Family and Parent Orientation has organized a few other virtual events on topics such as student support services, health and well-being, and academics. Please visit the Parent and Family Orientation webpage to view the full schedule. Sorry about that. I will be facilitating the panel today on READ's COVID-19 response and current information. I am joined by my colleagues. I will have them introduce themselves now. We can start with Hugh Porter.
Hi, I'm Hugh Porter, Vice President for College Relations and Planning.
Carrie.
Hi, I'm Dr. Carrie Baldwin-Sayer. I'm the Associate Dean of Students for Health and Wellbeing. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being here.
Britt.
Hi, everyone. I'm Britt Hoover. I'm the Assistant Dean for Student Support.
Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Shuckman. I'm the Associate Dean of Students for Student and Campus Life.
And then Nora.
Good morning. I'm Nora McLaughlin. I'm the registrar, and welcome to all of you.
Okay, so to get started, I would like to share the format of today's session with you. We are going to do a brief overview from the Risk Assessment Working Group's plans for fall 2020. This overview may cover some of the questions that you submitted. After that overview, I will ask some of your pre-submitted questions to the panel. If you have additional questions you would like to ask of the panel, you can privately send those to the chat box on Zoom. If there is time, I will ask the questions from the chat queue. We will aim to wrap this up by 10:55. If we are unable to answer any questions for you, please email coronavirusquestions@read.edu and someone will get back to you. Okay, so I'd like to start off with Hugh. Can you provide us a brief overview of what steps the college has taken in preparation for the fall 2020 term?
Thanks, April. It's really great to be here with all of you. I really miss the physical immediacy. I have one daughter recently graduated, another daughter in college. So my thoughts are with all of us as we go through this really interesting time. We all take this moment and our responsibilities so seriously, and I've really been working hard all summer to get this right. And your questions, your input, your engagement are so important to that continued work. We've established a set of protocols that I know all of you have dug into on our website, and I don't want to belabor them, but we continue to think about this regularly. We have a risk assessment group that meets regularly to talk about what we need to do to continue to keep our campus safe and keep education moving forward. And we think about that really in these four big buckets. So number one is public health. Oregon Health Authority is really very good organization that provides excellent information. They have a website with all kinds of stuff about what's going on in Oregon, and we pay very close attention to that. We're very pleased that the governor's actions in mid-July have reduced the spread of the virus in Oregon. Campus health, we're now getting that information thanks to your students and all of us who are completing a health check as we come to campus each day, and who are undergoing testing. And I'll have more to say about testing in a minute, but that's obviously a very important indicator. Personal behaviors, this virus is ultimately defeated best when we all care deeply about each other. And unfortunately, what that means is I can't stand very close to Nora anymore. And I have to wear a mask. And what we're seeing on campus is encouraging that your students are following these protocols, even though it's about as unnatural as it gets. And then campus capacity, what's our ability to sustain the work we're doing with testing, with personal protective equipment, with masks, everything else we need. So that's broadly how we're thinking about this. And we had a full assessment last week and came out feeling pretty good about things, but that will be something we do regularly. Testing, we were fortunate to identify testing capacity after some initial slow results. Our current provider is doing much better. There are probably one or two of you that might have students whose results needed to be resequenced by the lab, and I'm sorry that happened, and they got stuck in quarantine longer than necessary. With Audrey, the president's support, we are ramping up testing beyond what we've described, and we'll have really a full update end of this week, beginning of next week. In particular, we're interested in more frequent testing and not invasive kinds of difficult testing, but most likely a saliva-based testing for the students living on campus. But again, we'll have full updates end of this week. So I'm going to pause there and send things back to April.
Thank you, Hugh. Okay, so thank you everyone who submitted very thoughtful questions in advance. I'm going to start with the submitted questions, and I'm going to look towards Britt for this one, and then maybe Carrie can also add some additional thoughts. If a student tests positive for COVID-19, where will they stay while in quarantine, if sick or if not sick, and how will they get food?
Great question. So this year I'm overseeing support for students who are instructed to isolate or quarantine. I want to start with just giving a brief definition of what those terms mean. So if a student tests positive for COVID-19, they will be asked to isolate. And if a student has been exposed, or we believe they may have been exposed, they'll be asked to quarantine. In the cases of a student being asked to isolate, they will be relocated, if they live on campus, to the isolation residence hall that we've set aside. It's a standalone building, and they'll be placed in a single room, and they will receive ongoing daily regular support from my office, the Student Support Office, and the Health and Counseling Center. So students who are in isolation will have meals delivered by Bon Appetit. They can order those meals through the same Bon Appetit app they've been using throughout this pre-semester quarantine period. And we'll also be, like I said, working very closely with them, regular check-ins on symptoms, and then on my end, academic support, personal support, emotional support during their time in isolation. For students who are instructed to quarantine, again, those are students that haven't tested positive, but we believe could have been exposed to someone who did. They'll be instructed to quarantine in their current residence, their current room on campus. They'll be given thorough but very reasonable guidelines for how to do that. We've created for students a very thorough guide on isolation and quarantine on campus. It includes, guidelines for using shared bathrooms and spaces, but also, again, outlines what academic support, mental health support, medical resource support looks like. And students who are in quarantine, starting the first day of classes, will have meals delivered to them, to their residence hall room where they are quarantining. Again, those meals will be ordered through the Bon Appetit app and delivered right to the front of their room. Did I miss any parts of that question, April? Okay.
No, thank you so much, Britt. So in addition to that question, once in isolation, how will they be followed up by healthcare staff? I was hoping Carrie could touch a little bit on that, please.
Sure. Students are going to receive check-ins from the medical staff virtually throughout the isolation period, and will also be offered virtual counseling sessions as well. So, and if any students are determined to need in-person care, that will certainly be provided. And if there is ever a situation where a student would need to be transported to urgent or emergency care off campus, that would be arranged as well. But our medical staff has privacy protected, or what we call HIPAA compliant, virtual Zoom capabilities to be able to check in with students who are both in quarantine and in isolation. So students will have frequent check-ins from our staff.
Someone submitted a question asking how students will relocate to McNaughton, which is our isolation residence hall. I just want to briefly answer that question. When we learn a student has been instructed to isolate who lives on campus, I or someone that I work with will call the student and walk them through all the steps necessary. We have a packing list for students. They'll be asked to pack, a few days worth of comfortable clothing, personal supplies, academic supplies. If they need a cart wagon, we'll drop one off in front of their room. And then they will walk over to McNaughton. It's a short walk anywhere from campus. And they'll be able to swipe in with their Read ID card and go to the assigned room space. So they do not need to pack their full room. That was the question that someone asked. They just need to pack some personal effects for a few days. And that is, again, we'll be hands-on and help with that, delivering like a wagon if that makes it easier.
Thank you, Britt, for looking at those chat questions. I was going to ask you of that, and thank you. Okay. So the next question that was submitted is, for general information, what is the healthcare facility and or hospital where you would send students that need urgent or inpatient care? I was hoping Carrie could also address this one.
Sure. The two hospitals that are covered by our student health insurance plan are OHSU, which is the Oregon Health and Science University, and the Legacy Hospital System. Typically, even if our students are not covered by the student health insurance, if they have their own private health insurance, those two hospitals are typically also covered by most insurance companies.
Okay. Okay, so the next question that was submitted is, how will we support students' mental health related to COVID-19? Carrie, if you could start and talk about services the Health and Counseling Center provides, then maybe Britt could chime in about our care team. Carrie, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, so we will be providing virtual counseling sessions and this wasn't specific to isolation, was it, April? This was just in general? Okay.
Yes, in general.
Okay.
In general, not just isolation or quarantine, just in general, the mental health of our campus.
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, our counseling center is fully up and running and ready to serve students. We will be offering counseling visits via Zoom, and we have the availability to do in-person meetings as well when it's warranted. But our first choice, when it's not an urgent or a crisis situation, will be to have counseling sessions via Zoom. We'll also be offering a variety of different groups, facilitated groups that students might participate in on specific topics. We'll be offering virtual workshops and around areas of skills building for students, and different groups as far as affinity groups for students who might feel a particular, they would like to associate with other students that are that share similar or intersectional identities with them. So, and all of those things will be available in a virtual capacity. And again, in an urgent or crisis situation, in-person services would be available as well. And then going beyond just the services of the HCC, or the Health and Counseling Center, we also are planning at this point to open up our sports center in a different, more limited way than it has previously been opened, but we're really excited to, by following all of the guidelines of the National Collegiate Recreational Association and the guidelines of the Oregon Health Authority, have use of our sports centers so that students can have physical exercise, use of our cardio machines and our weight room facility, and also virtual exercise programs too, if students would like to participate in those in their rooms. So I'm happy that we're able to do those things. Britt, do you want to pick up where I'm leaving off? Or?
Oh, sorry, Carrie, if you mind, I'm going to ask two questions that are follow-up questions
Sure.
directed towards you for the health and counseling that were submitted in our chat box. When will counseling services begin, and how will students be informed about these services?
Yes, so we will begin our traditional counseling services. During the month of August, we have services available for urgent and crisis situations, but our regular counseling services will begin at the start of the semester. And we also have a student orientation session that we're doing, I believe, on Thursday. That students may participate in and ask questions and learn all about the services that are provided by the HCC. We also provided information about the services available in our virtual online orientation materials. And we'll also have some counselors who are out and about in person on campus, tabling, so in a very safe way with plexiglass barriers, so that if students have questions and they want to ask in person, we'll have counselors available during orientation week as well.
Thank you. Okay, Britt, I'm sorry to cut you off. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, another part of our pillars for student support on campus is the READ Care Team. In my role, I have the pleasure of chairing the Care Team, which is an interdisciplinary team of student life and other campus partners who try to proactively coordinate support to students who are having a difficult time. Our goal is early intervention. So when we know a student is starting to have maybe some challenges or hardships, we like to reach out to the student proactively, offer support, conversation, guidance, and connection to appropriate resources. Any member of the READ community can refer a student to the Care Team. Our referral form is available online and available to you 24/7, and it's at read.edu/care team. And when you fill out that form, basically you can share, like, here's why I'm worried about my student, and here's the kind of help I think that they would benefit from. And then I will screen those referrals and I'll connect them to the right appropriate office to provide them some one-on-one individualized help and support. So I want to make sure that you all are aware of that. I'll also be talking more in depth about Care Team tomorrow at the Supporting Student Success panel at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The other thing I want to address is after hours, we also have a robust on-call support system for students. So we have, for example, for counseling services, the READ Counseling Hotline, which is that free 24/7 counseling line where a student can pick up the phone, call, and talk to a counselor. But we also have staff who live on campus and respond to urgent mental health crises or other concerning timely events. So there's a warm kind of response in person who will guide you through the most appropriate steps in the evening. So I want to also just share that we have that in place for students this year as we've had for previous years. Someone asked the question, if someone needs emergency hospital care, how will parents be notified? A dean on call, someone like myself or Amy or Carrie, with the student's permission in an emergency, would call the emergency contacts and notify you that a student has been transported to the hospital.
I also wanted to add in that we have an after hours medical advice line also, so that students, if they just have, they're not feeling well and they're not sure what's going on, they can call our free 24, it's actually an after hours medical line if they would like some advice as well on that. And then there was another question. Oh, about the cost. I wanted to let folks know that counseling services, groups, workshops, and any medical visits are all free to the student, regardless of whether or not they have insurance. There are some services that have fees associated with them, like laboratory testing might have a fee associated with it, but a standard visit, either counseling or medical, has no fee and is free for students.
Thank you. Okay, this question is for Amy. How will we help first-year students get to know each other during this period of physical distancing?
Sure, that's a great question, and one that we've been thinking about all summer. I think one of kind of our frameworks is that we have to do things differently. We can't necessarily replicate the things that we used to do. And so we have we're trying very many different methods to really kind of see what resonates with students. I am actually going to share our orientation kind of events webpage with everyone, because I recognize only students can log in with their credentials. That is not what I wanted. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because it is not sharing the correct page.
It was.
I'm sorry?
It looked like it was the correct page.
Oh, it was not sharing the correct page on my end.
Oh.
So I apologize. We have a menu of different events that we're providing for orientation. The first kind of set for this past week were all virtual because we knew our students were going to be in quarantine while they were testing. So we had our house advisors hold nightly meetings with students and really kind of show them how to kind of navigate the different kind of online systems. And then starting last night, we had our virtual kickoff where we had students be able to kind of go pick up their own mocktails and really kind of get to know each other. And then they did their first kind of floor experience last night where they were all able to share about themselves in a virtual way. And then for the rest of the week, we have a mix of socially distanced in person and also virtual opportunities. We recognize students want to engage in different ways and people have different comfort levels as well. Our team has also created some really neat things that we call like grab and go programs where people can go like pick up like a succulent kit and be able to kind of decorate this pot that they put the succulent in. So we're really kind of focusing on those activities for orientation week. And then once the first week of class starts on the 31st, we're going to really transition our programming that student engagement is doing, and particularly the Gray Fund program, into really reaching students in different ways, both virtually and in small in-person distant events. I will say we're having our student engagement fair, which generally is out on the quad with tons of tables. We're figuring out how to pivot that to be virtual for students to really get to know about all the different other student-run clubs and organizations. And I've been really impressed with some of the ideas that they have come up with. Like one of them is a silent disco dance party where students can be kind of physically distanced, but be together in that kind of really fun atmosphere as well, because one of our things that students love the most at Reed is getting together and dancing. So I'm really excited to kind of see all these really creative ways that we're able to help connect students to each other.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, and then I think we're going to transition a little bit more talk about the dorm rooms and campus life. And there was a question that came up about common room spaces in the dorms and what our procedures are around those. I was hoping that Carrie could start the conversation a little bit about our common spaces and talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, thanks, April. As folks probably know by now, we had a single case of COVID that was identified during our initial screening tests last week, late last week. And the situation around that was that some of the students had broke quarantine and had gathered together in one of the common spaces. And we had provided instructions on what quarantine actually means. And although it is hard, we recognize that it's very difficult for students to do this, but we really need them to stay in their rooms and only go out when it's time to pick up their food and bring it back to their rooms and to go to the restroom. So as hard as that is, it's what we have to do for a really short period of time to keep the community safe. Unfortunately, a situation occurred where that didn't happen. So we felt it was really necessary to provide a reminder that students were not allowed to congregate together during this quarantine period. So really what some folks were concerned because we put up caution tape. And really what this was is just a reminder of what the instructions were that had already been given, is that those spaces could not be utilized during the quarantine period. So our hope is that as soon as all the students have been cleared from quarantine, that we can take that caution tape down But for now, it's there serving as a reminder that students are not to use those spaces until after they've been cleared for quarantine.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm going to ask a question from the chat box that's somewhat related to living in the dorms. Maybe Amy, you could touch on this. How do the student pods work? Could students on the same floor in the dorms hang out like a family, or what is the purpose of the pod units?
That's a great question, and one that we definitely know has caused confusion, so I really appreciate being able to clarify that. Pods, we're defining as a group of students who likely are sharing probably 1 or 2 academic classes together. We've also kind of created the definition of leaky pod, in which Nora and her team really worked hard with us to kind of form these student kind of groups. And then maybe a student's interest changed, or maybe they had a different preference for the modality in which the class was being taught. So we're finding some students are living in close proximity within the same hall together that might not necessarily be sharing the same class. That being said, we do not relax our physical or social distancing measures for any of our students on campus. We thought it would be really confusing and almost give kind of this false sense of security. What we hope for the pods is that students are really able to kind of engage in the academic curriculum together, that they can kind of work outside together, do things in groups, maybe 2 of them share some space in the common room together, and really kind of work through those kind of academic problem sets and things in different ways. So yeah, hopefully that answers that. But
Thank you, Amy. Okay, let's transition to inside the classroom and have some answers from Nora. So how many classes are in person versus online? And then another part of that, what exactly does it mean as a hybrid approach for students? Can students pivot back and forth between online versus in person?
Good questions. Approximately 48% of our courses are either online or online with remote access. And then 52% are only online or online with some optional in-person opportunities. So in the classes that are in-person only, there isn't really a way to pivot because there's not an online version. In a class where there's online with remote access, a student could choose either way. They could be in person one day and then they could participate remotely another day. And the reason we have this spread is we have a number of students who really wanted to be in person. We have a number of faculty who are very excited about teaching in person, but we also want to be very careful and offer opportunities for students who can't come to campus to make sure they can progress toward the degree. So and so some of our online classes do have an in-person component that's optional. So for example, a student who's living in Portland and is taking an online course in theater with an optional in-person event, once every 3 weeks, they might get together socially distanced, in a classroom and do something together as a group. So trying to have as many opportunities as we can for students to engage the academic program.
Thank you. Another question about the classroom. How is Hume 101 being handled this year? Nora?
Hume 110, the lecture is pre-recorded, and what we are saying is asynchronous. So a student doesn't necessarily have to get up at 9 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which has been a favorite event for students in the past. They can watch the lecture at their own time as long as they do that before their conference meets. Then the conferences that are attached to Hume 110 have a variety. Some of them are online only, some of them are in person, and some of them are in person with the opportunity for remote access. So they will, students who aren't on campus, particularly our international students, their Hume 110 experience is going to be an asynchronous lecture and then an online conference.
Okay, we've had a lot of questions about the tents on the front lawn and outside of Commons. What are the tents being used for, and if anyone could address this, I think maybe Nora or even Hugh could chime in on what our tent use is.
Well, I can start with the classroom tents, which we are fondly calling Earth, Wind, and Fire. And they are outside of Elliott Hall and between Elliott and the Canyon. And that offers the opportunity for students and faculty to engage in a classroom space with more open air and ventilation. So for the beginning of the semester, they will be fairly open. As the weather changes and it gets cooler and perhaps rain arrives, we will add walls to that so that they're still outside, but they are in an enclosed tent. So this offers people the opportunity for more air circulation, and it gave us more classroom space that allows for distanced participation. So students will be 6 feet apart in those tents, as will faculty, so that they can engage the academic program in that way. And I'll let somebody else talk about the Commons tent.
Sure. These tents, for those of you who haven't seen them, they do indeed look like large tents. We actually excavated the ground underneath them and installed permanent anchors. These are, well installed, and I think should be reasonably comfortable. You're not going to be on top of sort of rotting grass as you're sitting there. The largest tent is outside of Commons in the quad there. It's actually 8,000 square feet. It is designed as space for dining, and we've set that up with physical distancing mechanisms in place. But it's I've eaten out there. It's a lovely place to sit and speak with people across distance while you eat your lunch. And that will be up for the entire semester as well.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions regarding testing and an update on our testing plan, and if we have any updates on how long results are getting to us. I think, Carrie, you kind of touched on this a little bit more, but maybe you could just provide a little bit more details on results and when we're expected to receive all of them.
Sure. We expect the majority of test results to be back within 5 days of the individual being tested. There are unfortunately going to be some outliers to that. As with any kind of medical test, there are situations where the testing laboratory might need to repeat the test or resequence the sample. Sometimes the sample isn't sufficient, so it might have to be retested. There's a variety of reasons why a smaller number of tests wouldn't come back during that time frame. So unfortunately, if that is your student, I'm very sorry about that. It's the nature of medical testing, and it's just going to happen sometimes. But at this point, for instance, we've had the vast majority of all of our first year students who moved onto campus last week. Those tests have already been returned, and those students have been released from quarantine. That's Amy's nodding, so I think that's my that's my understanding at this point. I think there's maybe less than 10 students who are still waiting on tests.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to transition to more of the questions that were submitted via the chat box. Hopefully this will allow some time for us to touch on those. Again, if we don't get to all of the questions, you can email coronavirusquestions@reed.edu and someone will respond right away. So the first one I pulled was, how often are common use restrooms being cleaned? And I'm assuming this is not only within the dorm spaces, but outside of the dorms. And maybe Amy could talk on this, or I can talk a little bit. I know we're doing deep cleans every night with common frequently touched spaces being cleaned more often. The dorms are being cleaned every day.
Sure, I can give a little bit more about the residence halls. Our facilities and custodians team actually will be setting up a schedule that we'll be sharing with students soon, because one of the things that's really important is also to give our staff kind of that physical and social space when they are entering the residence halls as well, so they're able to kind of do that deep cleaning. and while kind of still maintaining those boundaries. So we will be sharing that in kind of their first community meeting and posting for the students when they can expect, particularly the bathrooms and the common spaces to be clean. They will be on a predictable schedule so that students will kind of be able to make their plans around that. And I really want to reiterate what April said, that there will be more frequent and deep cleaning. In addition, we're also going to be providing, or we have provided some disinfectant and other kind of cleaning supplies in the residence halls, so students can also take that responsibility themselves and kind of clean up after themselves, perhaps if they have touched a lot of things in the kitchen, or something like that.
Thank you. Okay, this one probably can be answered by Carrie. What happens with the in-person class if a student becomes ill, tests positive, or comes into contact with someone who has tested positive?
Oh, Britt wants it. She's
Oh
raising
yeah, I was
Well,
like, I could do it. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Carrie or I could answer this question, but in short, students who are asked to quarantine or isolate cannot attend in-person classes, work, or meetings or events until they are medically cleared from the Health and Counseling Center to do so. There is a process for sending communication to faculty, as well as a lot of support guiding the student on how to communicate with their faculty or campus employers that they will need to miss class. Faculty are prepared and ready and understand that students this year may need to miss some time physically in class. So they've all worked on an alternative plan for those students who might contact them and say, I'm unable to attend physically in person. If students are feeling able, like they're not experiencing such severe symptoms that participating in the Zoom class is impossible, we encourage them to stay connected and engaged in the class. For students who do need or cannot fully attend or engage in classes due to feeling symptomatic, we have a lot of academic support in place for how we'll communicate with faculty, help the student make a plan for catching up with class when they're ready, and help them kind of calibrate their options to find the right plan for them. So we do have hands-on academic support for students who are asked to quarantine or isolate this semester. Anything to add, Carrie?
No, that's great. Great. Yeah, it's important for folks to know that students who are able to participate in class will be given the opportunity to do that in a virtual or remote capacity. And many of the students won't have symptoms. They'll be fully capable of continuing to participate in class in a non-in-person way.
Thank you. Carrie, I thought I just saw a question for you. 1 second.
Well, someone asked how many students have tested positive, and I already said that one.
Yeah, what about
this group? Yeah.
Yeah, what about if students are in the classroom or in tents? Do they need to wear masks while they're in this area?
Yes, they do.
That was one of our questions. Yes, so masks or face coverings are required any time in the classroom or in the tents. The only time that's a little bit relaxed is if you're outdoors and you can maintain 6 feet of distance. But any other time you need to be wearing your face covering while inside buildings. Also, that's a little relaxed, of course, in your own dorm room, or if you're doing any type of personal hygiene, such as brushing your teeth.
Yeah, and what we're seeing on campus, because I know a lot of folks can't see what we're seeing, is that people are walking around campus by themselves and wearing masks.
Yes.
And this is great, and we actually really encourage that behavior. So I'm really pleased to see that there is a very high use of face covering wearing on campus.
Maybe Nora could address this one. Are there any in-person classes only, such as conferences? They're specifically thinking about their freshmen, and they're a little confused about which classes are all in person. Would their freshmen be taking classes all in person or all online? Is that a possibility?
It's possible. So, with roughly half and half of the courses being online or in person, but all of the first year students, almost all the first year students being on campus, they will not all be in all in-person classes. That's just not going to happen. We tried with the pod system to ensure that everybody was in at least one in-person class. And I saw a note in the chat about someone who's saying their student appears to be in only online courses. What also has happened since we created the pods is that some of the courses have moved from in-person to online, or a component of the course moved to online. So it's not a perfect system, but there are in-person courses available to first-year students, and we really did try to ensure that everyone who is going to be on campus would have an in-person opportunity, unless that was not something they wanted, in which case they could have chosen to switch to online courses.
Okay, thank you so much, Nora. The next question I'm hoping maybe Hugh can address. They're just curious of what the percentage of staff that will be returning to campus and what impact that may have, and maybe Britt can have on student services.
Yeah, I mean, we are actually in the process of putting together lists of everybody who will be on campus. I don't have those lists. It varies widely by department and the nature of work performed in our effort to overall de-densify the campus. Obviously, some administrative offices are set up with cubicles quite close together. You had to empty many of those. We did want folks who spend time supporting students to have an on-campus component to their work. And many of us, including myself, are on campus daily. But maybe Britt or Amy, I should let you or Carrie speak about the student services group.
It's my understanding that the entire student life division is on campus. That's my understanding. I'm getting some nods, right?
Yeah, all of our student life offices are open. I think a number of us are holding virtual meetings, particularly because of quarantine, but also we're finding it's one of the more kind of accessible ways for our students, because we have a lot of students that aren't on campus, that are off campus or remote or things like that. And we actually found from doing this all spring that sometimes our students are choosing to do virtual meetings with us, perhaps because they don't want to walk as far or things like that. And so it's been pretty successful. And I know many of us in student life are going to continue to really work to kind of communicate with our students so they know all the different modes of which that they can work with us.
Thank you. The next question is, does releasing students from quarantine take place in a staggered way? And maybe Carrie could address this.
It actually takes place on a completely individual level. So as soon as the student is informed via our secure health portal that their test result is negative, they receive an email through that health portal clearing them from quarantine. So that's, as soon as the student receives that email, they are officially cleared.
Hey, we have a lot of questions regarding testing. One of them is about clarity around testing on a regular basis, or will there be testing in place if a student is symptomatic or asymptomatic, and if we are going to be doing any type of ongoing testing. Carrie? And
I can talk about symptomatic and asymptomatic students. We will definitely be testing symptomatic students who we suspect may have COVID or have COVID-like symptoms. Those students will be tested at the HCC if they let us know and they come to the HCC. And then we will follow county guidance in regards to testing of students who have been exposed to COVID. If they have been considered a close contact, we will follow their guidance in that respect. And speaking of which, someone asked about the definition of close contact. We follow the definition of close contact that is initiated by the county and the state and CDC actually, which is a 6 foot distance for 6 feet or less of distance for 15 minutes or more, and that is regardless of whether or not someone is wearing a mask. And it's regardless of whether someone is indoors or outdoors. Hugh, would you like to speak to ongoing testing? I think you addressed that a little bit in your opening, but if there's anything you'd like to add.
Sure, yes. We do plan surveillance testing of asymptomatic people on campus, particularly regularly in the residence halls. And there are other groups that we're looking at. There was a question about off-campus students. We're working to do some modeling for surveillance testing there. We're not planning for as frequent testing of that group as of those living in residence halls.
Another question that we received is about expectations and community compliance with the expectations. If anyone wants to touch base on how we're going to be monitoring mask wearing and social distancing. I think a lot of you are experts on this. If anyone feels the need to take it.
Let me jump in. I think this is, been the conversation of throughout the country, really, is that college students are incapable of doing this. I don't believe that. And I don't think your students believe that. And what we're seeing on campus so far is encouraging. But this is going to be an ongoing effort by all of us to continue to educate and re-educate and rededicate ourselves to caring about other people. We are going to have a weekly survey. We'll start going out next week where we're asking the campus community to tell us what they're seeing. How are things going? And offer advice on how we can encourage better behavior. We do have a procedure if folks really are refusing to follow these procedures. We are going to have to react and quickly. As you've seen and read in newspaper accounts, the biggest problem is the large parties, and we really will have to react very quickly there, especially to prevent this from happening. That's the biggest risk, it seems, on college campuses as we learn more.
I will say, having spent a good amount of time on campus this past week or two, our students are doing a really great job wearing masks. And I think the thing that we're going to continue to kind of work with them on, and I think we need to work on this in general as people, is kind of the 6 feet social distancing part. But I really want to echo what Hugh has said, that I've been really impressed with the number of students that I'm seeing wearing masks, and faculty and staff as well. And I know for myself, often I'm just wearing it on campus, so I don't have to think about putting it up and down as I go.
Thank you, Amy. I think we touched on this a little bit, but can we provide some more information about what our contact tracing protocol looks like? What the notification of people would be who might be exposed, and you already covered the definition of close contact, Carrie.
Right. Sure, I can get us started on that. So our contact tracing, obviously the official contact tracing happens through the county. They wanted to be very clear that they are the contact tracers, but we have our own internal, we can call it contact tracing or contact asking process as well, that is led by the Health and Counseling Center staff. So as soon as there is a positive result, that person receives a call. If they're a student, they receive a call from the Health and Counseling Center. If they're an employee, they receive a call from the HR department. And thus begins the process of where that student has been and who they have contacted since a couple of days prior to their symptoms first starting, if they have symptoms, or from a couple of days before the positive result if they don't have symptoms. And then we go about the process of communicating with the people who that person has identified were close contacts of theirs, and then provide advice from that place forward, whether that be quarantine or symptom monitoring, whatever fits that particular situation. The county is also going to do that. And one of the identifying, or the goals for the county is to reach every positive person, to reach 95% of all positive people within 24 hours of that positive diagnosis. So they teeter in that 90% area. So the county doesn't always get to everyone within 24 hours of that diagnosis, but we do at Reed. So even if the county doesn't quite get there quick enough, we do. So either way, contacts are being identified very, very quickly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Amy, how many students do we have living in pods?
Sure, totally depends on the physical structure of our building. We have 27 different residence halls on campus, and they're all different, which is one of the things I love, but it also makes uniform things rather challenging. And then once you take into account the fact that we're not utilizing double and triple rooms, we're using them as single occupancy. So we're finding our pod size is anywhere between about 7 to 20, with a little bit of fluctuation right now. So.
Hey, it looks like we're wrapping up with the questions that were submitted in our chat box, and we're coming close to an end. I just wanted to leave a few minutes from anyone in the panel if they have anything additional they would like to say to the group.
Just how much I appreciate you all paying attention. It's what's going to make us do our work even better than I think we're doing it. And that we are eager to respond to additional questions. And I sent somewhere in that chat box link the coronavirus question email link. And we do have somebody monitoring that pretty much all the time. And we work to get responses out quickly. We will continue to update the website with additional information. The news and announcements link in the COVID websites is a particularly good one to track. We had, I think, 12 emails in the first 14 days of August. This is a changing situation. I just want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues who I work with every day for their work.
I would like to also thank everyone for tuning in and listening to this. It's been very helpful to hear all the questions and hopefully to provide a little bit more clarity. I'm excited for this upcoming semester, and I'm excited that we have students back on campus, and I know we're going to get through this all together, and I'm very hopeful as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.